Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today is episode 65, and I've got a special guest for you. But before we get to that guest, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do to stay in touch with the podcast. My next guest is the author of High Road, Cleanse Your Consciousness to Transcend the Ego and Ascend Spirituality. The book outlines how you can achieve your life's purpose, heal your body and mind, and draw happiness into your life. My guest pushes you to open yourself up to new perspectives by bringing together scientific discoveries as well as spiritual concepts. I'm excited to share with you D. Neil Elliot. Neil, how are you?
I'm really well, Dylan. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to be here on your show today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to, for the people that are listening to this, it's been kind of a month and a half or so for me because I just had my baby. So I'm finally getting back into podcasting and talking to you, obviously. But why don't you kind of lead us into who is Neil Elliot? How are you relevant in terms of not only this book, but what do you do with your life? And how have you kind of built it to be where you are now?
Absolutely. First, I want to say congratulations on your new little baby. It's very cool. I have 3 kids, so I understand that. So that's wonderful. So good luck with that, and have fun.
I appreciate it. So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good. Yeah, your wife might be having a little bit sleep deprivation, but yeah,
for sure.
Okay, so give everybody context. Born in Vancouver, British Columbia. Lived in Canada my entire life. Lived across Canada. Currently 62. I was born in 1960. Second marriage, 3 kids, 5 grandkids, and all my grandkids are Texans. And had to say it. And professional engineer with an MBA. And that's not important really, other than some stuff that I'm going to talk about as we get into the book. Yeah, so that's kind of context for who I am. So what was the second part of that question?
So how are you relevant to our conversation, right? Obviously, I talk a lot about mental health, but how did we get here to where you've written a book? You talk about, the idea of this book is cleanse your consciousness to transcend the ego and ascend spirituality. Right? I'm sure that didn't come from your MBA in engineering, right?
Oh, it did not. So let me give you, that's a good point. Let me give you a little bit of context there. So in the 90s, so I'd be in my 30s, I worked first as an engineer and then as a project manager. So in the 90s, I was managing, a variety of projects, large projects with lots of people. And when you do that, you need to be very inclusive of quite diverse and varying opinions in order to try and come to whatever the best agreeable solution is for whatever problem you're trying to resolve. Mm-hmm. And so as an engineer, of course, and we're all like this, but, engineers, and I can only speak for myself, but we're probably all a little bit like this. We know what's right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. And so in order to be inclusive of other people's ideas, in the 90s, I picked up books by Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Carolyn Myss. Positive Thinking came out at that time, picked up some books there, took some courses, really trying to get at this fundamental aspect of my thinking that helped me to broaden my perspective. Now, one thing that happened was that I became more inclusive of other people's ideas, but like probably all of us, it's like, yeah, okay, I can accept that you believe that, you're thinking this to yourself, even though you're quite congenial and open to it. I can accept that, you're saying that, I can see what you're saying, but inside you're going, yeah, I don't agree with that at all. So you kind of say those kinds of things to yourself. Now I might be alone in that, but I don't think so. So
I don't think so.
Anyway, yeah. So anyway, I spent the 90s doing this. And so outwardly, of course, as a professional, more open and inclusive. But as an individual, I never got at this programmed subconscious and unconscious programming to actually change what I thought. And I went into consulting, from employment into consulting in 2002. And life became about work. You don't work, you don't get paid. You're sick, you don't get paid. You take a vacation, you don't get paid. So for me,
Sure.
it just became work, 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 work. From 2002 to 2015, I slowly drove myself into this really deep, dark, despondent depression.
Yeah.
We're all great actors in our environment. I wore this facade. No one knew I was there. My wife didn't know. My family didn't know. But I was just totally done. I was just fed up with life, and it was a misery. Even though we go to Europe on vacations, and love going to Europe and seeing the architecture and going to museums and those kinds of things, and have a lot of fun. When I got home back to kind of day to day life, it's just a misery. And I was working fine. I was making lots of money, but I just couldn't seem to get ahead. And I thought, okay, in 2015, I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll pick up some newly issued books, some science books, some spiritual books, and see if I can get at this thinking and try and get myself out of this depression. And so I took a couple of years studying that. And in 2017, our house had been on the market for 5 years, finally sold. My wife jumped on a plane to go to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, visit family and friends. And we were in this little 1-bedroom rental apartment in the city. I sat down at the kitchen table. I planned out my suicide, and I crafted my suicide note. I was done. It's like, it didn't matter. It didn't seem to me, whatever I did, I couldn't get ahead. I was miserable. And I got to this point, I was thinking, why would I want to spend the next 10, 15, 20 years in this misery? Like, life had no purpose or point other than misery for me.
Right.
And so I sat down and I planned out my suicide. And I was planning out for about 3 months to be able to ensure my wife would be financially okay, and to say goodbye to family and friends without them knowing what I was going to do. About a week prior to me sitting down to do that, some information came to me in this really fortuitous fashion. And it promised to liberate me from my thinking if I followed it and if I studied it. And I was looking for any little sliver of hope to kind of keep going, even though I was done with it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give this one last chance. I'll study this material. If it doesn't work, I can pull the trigger. But if I pull the trigger and don't study this material, I just will never know. So I started to study this material, and I stuck with it. And a year later, almost a year to the day, I woke up. So this would be early November 2018, a year after. I woke up and my depression was totally gone. And I was full of this inner peace and love and joy. And I felt totally prosperous and abundant. And I had never been at such peace before in my life, or joy. And nothing had changed in my environment, but I had totally transformed how I thought about life and how I thought about the world and how I thought about others. And about a month after that, so 13 months after I began, late December 2018, I went into these 2 meditations 2 days apart. And as I went through this meditation, I kind of raised vibrational consciousness of my human consciousness as you go through this process. And all of a sudden, the spiritual energy flowed in through my head and it filled my body. And then it just totally engulfed me, like just bathed me in unconditional love. And it's an unconditional love that we don't have the human language to describe. It was totally supportive. It was non-judgmental. I felt not judged for anything I had done in my past. I felt I didn't have any resentments or felt ill will against anybody that had done anything in the past that I'd perceived to be kind of a negative thing. And I just felt totally cradled in this unconditional, non-judged, unconditional love. And I came out of that. I wanted to stay there forever. I didn't care what aches and pains my body had. I didn't care what diseases or illnesses it had. I was just totally supported and loved. And I came out of that meditation. And then 2 days later, I had the exact same meditation. And at that point, I knew that the new knowledge I gained and the process I followed is a truth. And I wanted to share that with everybody. And I thought, okay, well, I was really excited. I wanted to get on the rooftops and share this with people. Didn't know how, and I didn't necessarily have the language, but I wanted to share that, no matter where you are in life, if you have the right knowledge, you gain this right knowledge, you follow this right process, you can come back to the state that we're supposed to be in. And I thought, okay, well, if I get on the rooftops and share this, people are going to think I'm nuts. So I won't do that. And it took me a couple of years to figure out the best way to do it is to write a book and share the exact process I went through, what got me to that point of sitting down and planning my suicide, and then what the process I went through to come out the other end to where I am today. And ever since then, December 2018, it's been this ever evolving, deepening, spiritual awakening, new insights, new knowledge, and new states of inner peace and love and joy. And I believe that as more and more people do this and they change their consciousness, we will eventually bring this world into a new era of love and peace.
Well,
and that's my hope, that's right? My goal. That is the goal.
I think, it's remarkable to hear that, because it doesn't happen every day, right? Like, that's the unfortunate reality of a story like that, is it doesn't always come out with a good ending. Obviously within America, every year it's around approximately 45,000 people a year, follow through with their suicide. And so I'm remarkably proud of you for continuing through that, and at least giving yourself that chance to keep going. And I'm excited to hear more about what got you through, because hopefully somebody can take it and do something similar. So it's always so powerful to hear that there is hope for people in the world. Because if you don't know anything about me, I've been through my own suicidal issues. 2015, I nearly ended my life. And in 1996, my dad did end his life. So suicide is no stranger to me. And I have almost the gift and the curse of understanding both sides of it, of being on the receiving end of it and also being on the end of wanting to do it myself. So it's, this has always been a big conversation for me. A thought that I have overthunk for 20 years, if not more. And so it is always remarkably interesting to hear other people's stories. And I'd love to hear more about, like, what was the process that put you on track. And then, even the process that put you off track. Like, what were the things that you recognized throughout your journey that drove you away from, being fulfilled with yourself? And then what were the things that brought you back in line with that?
Okay. So again, I'm sorry about your dad. I mean, obviously I understand this state, and good for you for, getting yourself out of this position in 2015. So kudos to you for that. Excuse me, one second. Oh, okay. So one of those. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so there's a lot here.
Right.
Let me tell you about the structure of the book. I'll get into the book, but I'll get to give you the structure of the book, sure, and then I'll kind of explain things as I go. So there's 5 parts in the book. Part 1 is an overview of what you're going to learn. Part 2 is a really candid memoir of my life. And I made it candid, even though I'm a private person, I made it candid because I thought it's really important for people to understand my state of consciousness as I progressed through life. And I give specific examples of things that I adopted as beliefs that eventually took me to this place of suicide. And so I've written this really candid memoir to do that. Part 3 of the book is a chapter in consciousness and in science. And what it's designed to do is take you through the same process I did to understand things that we know in science today that helped open me up to receive this new information that showed up on my doorstep, so to speak, a week before I sat down at this kitchen table to craft my suicide note. Part 4 of the book, I introduce you to this new information I received, and I call it truths. And it's really about mind and matter. And it provides this foundation for this bridging this gap between spirituality and science, and lays this foundation for you based in science, but lays this foundation for you if you're interested to embark on this journey. Part 5 of the book is really my personal experience as I went through the 7 steps. And so my recommended way to read A Higher Road is to read it cover to cover, understand the process in its entirety. And then if it resonates with you, go back and start with some of the science material or directly with step 1. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. There's no right or wrong, good or bad, true or false. Just, if you bought a print copy, either put it on your shelf to reread it in 5, 10, 15 years, or give it to somebody without any colorful commentary about the book and let them discover for themselves whether or not this can help them. And the reason I say that is because we can never accurately judge the inner reality of another person. They might be really, really kind and affable and considerate, but inside they could be a mess and you just don't know. Right. And I would imagine that's your same experience. No one kind of knew you were there. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. I didn't let anybody know.
No. And I don't know if that's just men that are like that. I don't think so. There's, I think everybody's like, yeah, I think it's people. Yeah. So first off, and then, so the first concept that I talk about and is in the memoir, and this is really that we individually create every event and every experience that comes into our life, whether it's an accident, whether it's winning a car, whether it's, anything you like or don't like, you are the creator of it. And although right out the front, some people go, I don't understand that, or I don't agree with that, but I'm going to walk you through how and why that happens if you go through these 7 steps. But what I want to do with that is I make this link between this subconscious programming, these beliefs that I adopted and accepted as I grew up as right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, and how they linked to me manifesting, sitting down and crafting this suicide note. And in part 3, then what I do is I take people through a new concept of consciousness. And some of it will be new for some people. Some of it will, I'm trying to get everybody on the same page in part 3 of this book, and everybody to understand that, essentially everything that you believe to be right or wrong, good or bad, true or false is really just a belief. And so this is a process that I had to go through based in science to understand a new concept of consciousness. So this understanding of consciousness is going to shift as you go through my book, because I'm going to take you kind of the same path that I did. And I used to believe, for example, that everything that I thought and spoke was all in my brain. It was something that I had been exposed to, something I learned, something I got at school or learned from other people. And I cobbled all these things together in my brain and, spoke sentences that hopefully made sense to people. So used to think that. Then through these scientific books that I read, which I walk people through in Higher Road. These scientific books I read, I came to understand that consciousness is not only in my brain, but it's in my entire body. And everything that I talk about in this part of the book is all based in science and is backed up. It's documented. It's observed. It's things that, as an engineer, we really like. If you can measure it, if you can observe it, if you can calculate it, okay, this is a good thing, right? So I needed that to ground me and give me this foundation.
Yeah.
And so I learned that what we think about affects the expression of a cell, and the expression of a cell is the work it does. So we either promote the well-being and the health of ourselves, or are contrary to it, draw illness to ourselves.
Right.
The other thing I learned was that we can grow new brain cells. We can rewire our neural pathways, and we can grow new brain cells. And all of this stuff that I talk about is all conceptual, based in science, but it's done in a way which you're going to understand. You don't have to be a scientist to understand this stuff. It's common everyday language that's used to describe these things. And so my understanding of consciousness as I was progressing on this process was, it was not only in my brain, but it was in my entire body. And then I realized that, no, it's kind of all around me. And what I see now is that, thoughts go by, like the analogy I use is thoughts go by in this stream. And I pick a thought out of that stream. And if it's consistent with, we do this in a nanosecond, I pick a thought out, I look at it, I consider it. If it's consistent with the patterns of thinking and feeling that I have developed over a lifetime, I keep it and I dwell on it and I think about it. If it's something that's contrary to that, I throw it back in the stream and away it goes. And so I see this stream of consciousness that is outside of me. These go by and I'm picking all the time and analyzing. So as we grow from, babyhood to adulthood, so we're born, and up to age 5, the baby is really just this sponge. The brain doesn't develop to make its own decisions until about age 5. Mm-hmm. And so as a baby, it's just this sponge that's absorbing everything, its environment, its family's attitudes, yep, language, religions, culture, traditions, really tuned into emotions. Yep. And really what's happening is that you're starting this process that shapes your personality and gets programmed in your subconscious mind and your unconscious mind. At age 5, you perpetuate these things that you believe to be right or wrong, good or bad, true or false. And you go out and you learn new experiences by meeting other people and going to school and stuff like that. As we grow from babyhood to adulthood, we think we're becoming versed in the ways of the world. But really what we're doing is we're programming our subconscious mind, and we are shutting ourselves off from the light. And the light is, connection back to source. And so we live in this duality. We live, your soul is infused in this process at the time of conception. And it brings past life experiences with it. And it forms part of this programming that goes in your subconscious mind. The little I mind of ego is created at the same time of conception. And it takes control of the development of the body over the 9-month period and through the genetic plan and the DNA of the sperm and the ovum. And as you grow, what happens is that your egoic mind takes control of your life, and it programs the subconscious mind. And then what happens is that until your soul wakes up and understands what it's doing to itself by creating events and experiences that come into your life, the ego continues to take control, and you respond to things from your subconscious mind and your conscious mind that is ego driven, that utilize the tools of the universe that we talk about later in the book. And So I've jumped right into some stuff. So people that aren't spiritual, this is going to be might be a bit of a stretch for them. But I can tell you, look, I was an engineer, grew up agnostic, didn't really, I knew there was probably something that organized and designed the world, but I didn't have any beliefs around it really. And it wasn't until I went through this process that changed my life that I made this connection back. And now I understand how and why we're here. So to carry this on, so it's like we're method actors. Like a method actor, say you're doing a period piece and you're getting ready to go on camera. You dress the part, you eat the part, you play that role in that part long time before you actually get on film. So you really get into character. You speak it, you live that part. And then when you get on film, the director calls action, and those actors are really in it. The director calls cut, the actors come out of it, and they high five each other and they go, wow, like you did such a great job. I really felt like I was there when, you did X, Y, Z, right? And the difficulty is that our soul is our reality. The ego is merely a tool of creation to create individuality out of the wholeness of and the unity of the divine. Your soul is a fragment of divine consciousness that's here to learn a lesson over many lifetimes. And so your egoic, this egoic tool, we identify with this, that this body is solid, that these objects around us are solid, and that this is our truth. This is our reality. This is the method acting piece. The difficulty is that the director never calls cut, and we never come out of that. We believe this, that this is our truth. This is our reality. And when you can actually understand that we live in this duality of our truth is our soul, and this ego is merely a tool for us to learn the lessons that we want to learn over many lifetimes, to end up coming back to our truth, which is that, we are not here to please God. We are here to express God, and God is unconditional love. And for us to do that, we need to let our soul gain mastery of our life, and let it be an expression of the divine through our will and through to everything and everyone in our environment. And when you learn these processes and you learn these mechanics of the universe through the scientific information, and you bridge this gap between spirituality and science, what you will do is you will end up making this connection back with the divine. And when you make this connection back with the divine, your life totally changes. You become divinely inspired to be this embodiment of unconditional love to everyone and everything in your environment. And because you understand these mechanics of the ego and the soul and why we are really here as souls, you can totally change your mindset, and the things that drive you to burden and wound you with your thinking that keep being repeated in your lifetime and drove me to this point of crafting my suicide note and planning out my suicide. You understand why and how that's happened, and you transcend that. And when you transcend that, then what happens is you have an entirely new perspective about life. And you have an entirely new perspective of what your purpose is here as a soul. And that really you are here to bring unconditional love to everyone and everything in your environment. And, I should probably talk about a bit of science to kind of give everybody a little flavor of that. But I just want to let you respond right now to, whatever it is that you want to say.
There are, it's a big idea. All of those things are big ideas. And so I have so many questions, and so many comments and thoughts. I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're not Whereas a lot of people kind of side with a specific religion. This doesn't feel like it has uh, a specified religion attached to it. It feels different of sorts. But you correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's no religion.
And it
There's no religion. This is just, yeah, this is
it's a
for lack of a better term, it's spiritual.
right. And so there's a belief in something, right? And then you can call that a god, but I feel like it's even different than just simply. I almost feel like at this point God is such a simplistic term that it doesn't really fit this in some regard.
So yeah, do you want me to, I can give you a little bit of a, let me give you a little, so actually let's finish your thoughts, and then let me give you some more context around all of that. That might be a better way to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much I have beyond that. It's just so interesting because it's, and I'll be perfectly honest. This isn't something I necessarily believe in myself. I very much look at myself as an atheist, but I am very, very interested and curious about how spirituality functions within people. Very much it makes sense to me, of like listening to how you speak about it. It very much makes sense to me. And how necessary it is. I think of spirituality in terms of this value of faith, right? I think faith is a very foundational value, but you can have faith in a lot of different things. As I have faith in my lack of spirituality. That's not to say that I don't have a form of spirituality. I just don't necessarily believe in entities that like gods, if you will. Though I do have faith in a form of maybe chaos. It's still an idea that I'm forming myself, because to speak these things into existence is almost impossible with the lack of language that we have. But it is remarkably interesting to listen to how we structure these things, because I think faith, again, is foundational in how we approach the self, right? We require faith in something to keep going through the endless traumas and struggles and pain of living life. It's certainly not, if you really look at life, it's not always that easy. It's not always comfortable. It's not always enjoyable. And so there has to be something that kind of transcends all of those deep and intricate issues that we go through as human beings. And so I really think faith is necessary, but very much like you, which I think is the remarkable part, is I don't require people to think how I think. I don't require people to have faith in what I have faith in. But I think it very much is a natural consequence of living a long life, is this requirement for some kind of faith.
Okay. And I'm glad I let you finish, because that gives me more, maybe more context to be able to provide you some information to not convince you. And I'm not trying to lead you or push you down this path at all. But I'd like to give you a few things to think about that may immediately or over time affect kind of the way you think about things. So let's start with a little bit of science. So we know in science today that nothing is really solid. At a subatomic level, we are all just energy. So you know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know it intellectually. You might not know it deep, but you know it intellectually. We know this from science today, that nothing's really solid. It's just energy. And the other thing we know in science today is that every cell in a body, every cell that's in a body, and there's over 50 trillion cells in a human body, every cell in a body carries the library of information for the entire body. And we know that in science today. The only difference between a liver cell and a skin cell or a heart cell is the work that it does. So these cells get together over a 9-month period as this body grows and then maintains this over a lifetime. These cells get together and their job is to create a liver. And they work harmoniously. They never intrude on each other's work. They never suddenly spring into making an ear while they are creating a liver. And the only difference between those cells and a heart cell or your skin cell or any other cell in the body is the fact that it is focused on doing this work. There's more harmony in our body between our cells than there is, when we as individuals get together to work on a joint project. And so then we look at one cell. One cell has, do you have any microbiology?
Very
background?
little, but
Okay.
I can try.
No, well, I'll describe this in a way. You can go verify everything I say here, but a cell has a permeable membrane around it, and that gives it individuality. So the question here is, so I'll give everybody this question to begin with. When did consciousness first creep into living matter? Okay, so that's the question. So we look at an individual cell. It has a permeable membrane around it, gives it individuality, gives it protection. And the cell can discern when it can discern the right kind of nutrition that's going to be healthy for it, and it accepts it through this permeable membrane. It discerns when there is buildup of toxic waste that's going to be harmful to it, and it ejects it outside of this membrane. And that is the first act of consciousness. It is purposeful, and it is, kind of deliberate. And so now you think about this one cell that does this. So science, so we'll flip to science for the moment. So science believes that there was a big bang, and out of that big bang came the material universe, came electromagnetism, and then over billions of years, became planets and all the things that we see. And then science also believes that this big bang created this electromagnetism, that these particles of energy randomly got together to create elements. These elements randomly got together to create the first living molecule. The first living molecules randomly got together to create the first living cell. And from there, we have all of the things that we see on our planet today. All these living life forms, plants, birds, animals, insects, etc. And so all of this random activity. But when you look at one cell and this thing that I just went through, that it describes this first act of consciousness, which is very purposeful, then you have to say, well, where is this purposeful design coming from? And so if there's consciousness in the first living cell, then why wouldn't there be consciousness in the first living molecule? And if there's consciousness in the first living molecule, why wouldn't there be consciousness in the elements that got together to create this first living molecule? And first living molecules, there's only specific elements that can get together to create this living molecule out of the range of elements that are available for this to happen. And if there is consciousness in those elements that got together to create this first living molecule, why wouldn't there be consciousness in the energy that first fused to form these elements? And when you stop and you just study evolution, for example, so pick up some books on Darwin and by others and study evolution, you will come to understand that any adaptation that happens to a living creature over many years, maybe thousands of years or billions of years, is always purposeful, and it's always fits the design and the requirement for that entity. There is design and there's intelligence with everything that's around you, right down to the act of forming the first set of elements that randomly got together for this living molecule that randomly got together in science's perspective. So when you go through this process, you will understand that there's consciousness at all levels. And then you have to ask, okay, well then, you ask scientists, well, why was there a Big Bang and what was the impetus for this Big Bang? They have no idea. They just know that there was a Big Bang because they can, record it and they can calculate it and they can measure it. All things we like as engineers and scientists.
Of course.
And, but we don't know why. And when you look at the, look, your baby's a great example, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, the joy that you feel and the love that you feel, this is from a parent to a child is a huge thing, right? And, all of this is designed to have these life forms, kind of have these experiences. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about soul evolution. Excuse me one second. So, let's talk about souls and then we'll come back to some science stuff. So, souls come here many times over many lifetimes to learn varying lessons as they go through this evolutionary journey. So you need to take the frame of reference off of one lifetime when you look at things that happen to people, and you put it on an evolutionary basis of a soul over hundreds, thousands of lifetimes, whatever number you want to choose. And, so the soul comes here and it's like, it's infused in this process and it's here to learn lessons, and it creates every event and every experience that comes into its life through its egoic thinking. And I'm going to link this in a moment. And so it comes in, it learns these things. It comes into an environment. You're born in varying genders, in varying places of origin, varying colors of skin, sometimes religious, sometimes not religious at all, sometimes wealthy, sometimes poor, sometimes highly educated, sometimes not educated at all, varying languages, etc. And all of these things are designed for the soul to learn these lessons that it wants to learn, needs to learn in this evolutionary process. So it's like a soul jumps into a yellow pond, and it comes out dyed yellow, and it's educated and lives a yellow life. The next time it comes here, it jumps into a red pond, and it comes out red mixed with the yellow, but it's in this red lifetime. So it is, educated in red lives and lives a red life, but it's mixed with the yellow, and it starts to have some input from this yellow thing that it first jumped into. And that goes on lifetime after lifetime after lifetime with varying colors. Finally, the soul wakes up and understands that all of these events and all of these experiences that come into its life, it's creating through its egoic behavior. And then it begins this process to shed the yellow, shed the green, shed the red, shed the blue, until it comes to this point where it has shed all of its colors. It becomes this embodiment of unconditional love. It's expressing unconditional love to everyone and everything in its environment. And then when it leaves that lifetime, the body is ephemeral, it returns to dust, and the soul steps into the light, and it does not need to be reincarnated again. And that's when your real life begins. This process that we're in right now is merely a school. We call this Earth. This school we call Earth is here to allow us to feel the things that we want to feel, to experience the things that we want to experience, to shape and hone and hue our personality over many lifetimes. It's only through lessons of suffering will the journeying soul gain self-knowledge to retain individuality after discarding the ego. The ego is this divinely ordained tool that uses the mechanics of the universe to create every event and every experience that comes into your life. So how does that happen? So before the Big Bang, so we are not matter imbued with consciousness. We are consciousness made visible through the descent of vibrational frequency of electrical particles. So before the Big Bang is a state of universal consciousness in equilibrium. It's opposing impulses, which is the very basic energy of the universe. And at the time of the Big Bang, these opposing impulses were ripped apart, and we see them as electromagnetism. Electricity is a movement in consciousness, and consciousness in movement. And the attraction repulsion part, the magnetism, gives form to that consciousness plan to experience itself. So you think with electrical impulses in the brain, you feel with magnetic impulses in the nervous system. Every thought that you have creates a consciousness plan, a plan to go out and create something. And the feeling you have is whether it's a loving feeling or a hateful, vengeful feeling, will magnetize that consciousness plan. And the more repetitive consciousness thinking and feeling that you have over time magnetizes that consciousness plan to a like event or experience that comes back to rebound into your life to teach you the lessons that you need to learn. Everything that you think that is contrary to unconditional love, judgment, criticism, denigration, slander, falsehoods, lies. There's a list of fundamental things that we as individuals, as the ego creates and reinforces over lifetime, will create these rebound experiences and events that come back to your life to burden and wound you until your soul finally wakes up and understands that this is what it's doing. If you express unconditional love to everyone and everything in your environment, and you're creating these blueprints, and they are all blueprints in unconditional love, in caring, and in kindness, and these are your thoughts, not only your actions and your deeds, but your thoughts, you will experience those rebound forms of love and peace and joy in your life. And this is the mechanics of how we utilize the tools of the universe unknowingly, ignorantly, to create every event and every experience that comes into our life. And whichever lifetime that your soul finally wakes up and understands what it's doing to itself, will be the lifetime that you start to shed these colors. So you may have already begun this process. I don't know. I don't know about me even. You don't know where you are in your soul's journey. But when you are at a point, you will finally be curious and open. And what got me to that point of being curious and open was this point of suicide. And so as I became open to this and then learned these mechanics and learned this stuff based in science, things we know today. So, we know that our thinking creates either health of our cells or, is contrary to that health. We know that in science today. We don't know why and we don't know how. But what I'm describing to you is what the new knowledge that I gained that enabled me to explain this in a way to people and share this with people so that they can actually have something that based in science, but is foundational to bridging this gap between spirituality and science. And since I grew up agnostic, I wasn't religious. I had no learning in religion, really. I just knew that if you did bad things, you go to hell or, purgatory, wherever you go. If you do good things, that's great. But it's not what you necessarily, it is what you do and it is what you say, but what you think is just as important, if not more important. And if you continually have thinking and feeling patterns that you've embedded in your subconscious mind that create these experiences, you keep creating these rebound forms that come back to burden and wound you to help your soul learn these lessons. So I'll give you another analogy. So think of this body as a rented vehicle, a self-driving vehicle. So you are programming the programming for the self-driving vehicle in your subconscious and your unconscious mind. Your ego's in the driver's seat and it's driving the self-driving car. So the self-driving car may go, oh, turn here. The ego can go, no, I don't want to turn there. I want to go down a little further and I'll go on the next left or whatever. So your ego is still in control, but you know as well as I do, when you drive to work the way you do now, so if you're driving to work, sometimes you get to work and you go, I have no memory of how I got here. All of that was subconscious programming. And we do this. This is what keeps us alive, right? Mm-hmm. This subconscious programming.
Right.
And but the patterns that you developed and you program in your subconscious mind is like the self-driving car. So your soul is in the passenger seat. It's bound down. It has no control over this car. So the ego is in control until you start to dissolve these bondages of the soul. So the soul can start to influence and take kind of correct some of these negative patterns of thinking and feeling to create these experiences of love and kindness and caring for other people and other living things on this planet, and eventually take over the driver's seat and put the ego in the passenger side, and then start to reprogram the self-driving car. So the self-driving car is in alignment with where we come from. And where we come from is unconditional love. And in my book, I share an experience of someone who had a near-death experience. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I'll give you a further context. But does any of that make better intelligence sense for you as you look around and you look at your little baby that grew over 9 months? Who took control of developing that little beautiful child that you have? It wasn't the mother.
I live with a rule, and it's going to be an oversimplified response to all of that incredibly intelligent discussion that you had there. I don't know what I don't know. And I think this conversation right here is a really, really good example of that, of not only me, but I think we as a society, we as two human beings in this discussion are having a conversation about something that we literally cannot know, right? Science is, for all intents and purposes, theories, right? What we know is not truly what we know. Science 400 years ago, 500 years ago, thought the world was flat, and that turned out to be wrong, right? We used to think that the earth was the center of the universe. Turned out to be wrong. We used to think the sun was the center of the universe, and that turned out to be wrong. And so I'm certainly not going to tell you you're wrong, because I don't think that really matters, right? I think what matters is that what you have found for you works for you, right? If that is what works for you as a human being to be a good person, that's phenomenal, right? I applaud you for that, and I'm happy for that. Is that what is right? I have no clue. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I have no idea if any of that is exactly what is the right thing, because I have no authority to say that, right? I don't think anybody does. There's so many plausible things in there that make sense, right? There's so many things in there that I think, for me, I look at foundations and fundamentals a little bit differently. I look at it from a societal perspective, not necessarily just a spiritual or individual perspective. And so when I look at what you have kind of built for yourself and found for yourself, and revealed for yourself, I look at it and I see intricate pieces that require you to act accordingly, to act in accordance with your own values, your own thoughts, but also with an enormous amount of regard and respect for other people, right? The unconditional love, the passion for that unconditional love is an enormous accomplishment for anybody. Because let's be real, violence is is not uncommon ground for humanity. It's not uncommon ground for nature in itself, right? And so having these conversations, and even building somewhat of a structure within yourself to say, this is what I believe. This is how I want to live my life. And even if it's not looking at the individual self and saying, these are my structured rules of how I live, and building it outside of yourself and saying, all of these things that you've said to me, right? Building that structure is fundamentally important for every human being to do. Now, the only thing I would say is that can be dangerous, right? And uh, this has been well documented throughout the history of humanity, right? If you get that wrong and you build a structure that says mine is better and more, more important, more relevant than yours, well, guess what? That's where you get violence from, right? Because then it's not about unconditional love, and it's more about mine is, you need to follow mine, right? And this is, we're having this conversation in society right now with the Roe v. Wade conversation, but this conversation has been had many, many a times across many different problems. In World War II, it was, the Nazis or the Jews, right? And we all know how that worked out. And before that, in Soviet Russia, it was, communism versus the the kingdom, right? Like the czars, and so on. And we can go all the way back to the beginning of time of human history. But these conversations in terms of spirituality are so, they can become so potent. And the only thing that I would say in kind of, not necessarily in contrast to you, but to always have that, and it seems like you do, but that urgency to say this can be dangerous if used improperly, because that is humanity to me, is that anything can be used improperly, and that can spark the wrong direction. But from my perspective, listening to all of this, it seems remarkably open, right? It's not like you require me to follow what you're doing, and that's remarkably good. I think that's important.
Yes. So I will agree with all of the things you said. So I want to give you a couple things. So let me say this first, is that there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. So it's entirely your choice on what you follow and don't follow. It is your path.
True.
And you can choose whatever you want. But let me give you one more context for you to possibly get you to appreciate that what you think about will create a rebound form in your life. And if you choose to carry on doing that, however you want to live, that's entirely up to you. I'm not requiring you or telling you you have to do this. I'm saying for those people that are ready to understand or can understand and want to follow this path, this is a way to achieve unconditional love and peace and security and joy in your life. If you don't want to, that's totally fine. That's entirely up to you. So the ego uses the tools of the universe. So when you think about that, electricity is a movement. Bonding, rejection. So the only way that you create happiness in your life is to draw to you, bond with everything that you like. I like that ice cream. I like that house. I like those people. I like that event. I like that kind of car. And so you bond with those things. The way you create safety and security in your life is you reject. I don't like those people. I want to live in this neighborhood. I don't want to live in that neighborhood. I don't like that kind of food, etc. You reject those. It is the only way the ego can create happiness or safety and security in your life, is through these bonding rejection mechanisms. your um, so give an example of that is you want to get a new car. You like this car, you love this car, you go out, you make a plan, you buy this car. And so you save up your money, you go, you get this car. You feel this real boost of happiness. You're happy. You have this car of your dreams. It's like an amazing car. And, you're really joyful about it. And then what happens over time is it becomes kind of dull and mundane and boring. So you show it off to your friends. Oh, you see my new car? You get a little boost of happiness. Oh, got one up on you. And, see this great little car that I have. And you get this little boost of happiness. But eventually it becomes this new possession becomes mundane and boring. So what do? You set a new goal. You go out and you try and get something else that your life becomes this endless chase of goals. And when you let your externalities, what you see is merely a reflection of your beliefs. You change your beliefs, you change what you see. So if you believe the world is negative and you believe people are right or wrong or good or bad, this is what you see. I'll give you an example of this. So in this pandemic, there are two women I know that went for a walk. So there's not a lot of people on the street. And just down the street from us, this historic building that's got the entrance on the second floor. So if you come out of the building, you have to walk down these really large steps down to the street level. So as they're approaching the bottom of those stairs, this elderly woman came out and she was gesticulating and she was angry and she was yelling and she glared down at them and pointed at them and said, "Stare all you want, stare if you will, I don't care." And had this really kind of nasty look on her face. The one woman went, "Oh my God, this woman's a danger. I'm going to phone the police." She stepped back, pulled out her cell phone, called 911. The other woman thought, "I wonder if this woman's okay. I wonder if she needs help." So she reached out and said, "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" And as soon as the woman up on the stairs heard that, she said she calmed down. She explained her story. She explained what happened and why she was feeling like she was feeling. The only difference is the program beliefs that people have about their environment. That's the only difference in that situation. You change your beliefs, you change what you see. If you are constantly have negative feelings, judgment, criticism, condemnation, etc. of people, this is what you see in life. This is what you experience in life. And through these bonding rejection mechanisms, you bring this to you. So I explain in my book in 2011, for an example, and you don't have to believe any of this, but I'm just explaining how my book is. So in 2011, I did something every day for a year. And what happened is a year later, I manifested, I won in a lottery, which I didn't even know this was a prize in the lottery. I won in a lottery a 65,000 hardtop convertible Lexus. And later in my book, I describe exactly what I did every day for a year and these mechanics of the universe that I use that created this win of this 65,000 hardtop Lexus convertible in my life. I didn't know at the time at 2011, I just thought, oh man, I'm really lucky. I got this car of my dreams and, it's wonderful and all of that. And wasn't I lucky to win it in the lottery? There's a very specific reason why I won it, because I manifested it through these mechanisms and I didn't even know I was using them. And we do this moment by moment every day in our life to create these rebound experiences that will manifest in the future. And we can never link our feeling and our thinking to what these things are that come into our life, whether it's an accident, whether it's a fight, whether it's a person that comes in that, you finally fall in love with. All of these things, you are the creator of them. And when you can understand these mechanics and how all of this works, you can make a conscious choice of carrying on living your life like you do, or decide that you're going to change it. And it's entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. There's no true or false. So you can choose. And so I offer this process and the material that I use to help people that are, one, interested in pursuing a spiritual awakening, or two, are in a really bad place and they are, wanted to find a way to actually come out of that to be in a better place. And it's entirely up to you guys. It's entirely up to the reader. But I'm going to say, if you read it, if you read A Higher Road cover to cover and it resonates with you, this could be your pathway to a brighter, more fulfilling, loving, kind, peaceful, secure experience than you have ever imagined.
Well, that is always the hope, right? That's why we write books like we've written, for that kind of experience. I am curious. You mentioned it a couple times, the idea of unconditional love, and I am curious, what is your definition of love?
Human language is confining and restricting because of the very construct of it. We each have our own understanding of a particular word. So I'll give an understanding of this, but so love is just this total. I've never been asked to describe this before, so it might take me a moment here. But it's really, no matter what anybody is doing or saying or being, however they are being, it is accepting them for who they are, loving them for who they are, caring for them for who they are, and understanding that what they think and what they feel is not good or bad. It is just the state that they're in, and trying to imbue in them a feeling of caring and love and acceptance, no matter who they are. I don't know. That's the first time I've ever tried to describe that.
It's always surprising that, because I ask that question quite often nowadays, and more often than not, people have never been asked that question. That's always remarkably interesting to me. I look at love as more of an emotion than I guess this large entity, as I think you might, I don't know if entity is the right word, but I look at it as action without expectation, right?
And it is, well, that's unconditional love. It's like no expectation, and it doesn't matter what anybody does. No expectation. And it is an emotion. It is an emotion. Absolutely. It's you feel it.
Yeah.
You feel love for the person. It's not an intellectual exercise. It is feeling, but that feeling doesn't have any restrictions to it.
Yeah.
And there's no conditions, like zero conditions.
Certainly.
Someone could be stabbing you and you're not going to be saying you're a nasty person. You're going to love them for who they are. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't, be, kind of confined somewhere until they are behaving appropriately for a society. But, for our whatever rules we have in society. But you're not going to judge them for it, and you're not going to try and get revenge for it, and you're not going to think that they're bad people for it. You love unconditionally. It is, I don't know, it's tough to describe.
Well, I guess to me, and I guess I'm curious about this because I think you've kind of alluded to this multiple times, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Like, I look at things like love as very much a choice. If someone's stabbing me, like I'm probably not going to choose to love them if they're doing it maliciously, right? If someone stabs me by accident, yeah, maybe we'll see that. But what do you then look at in terms of, through this perspective that you hold? How do you look at malicious intent? Like, I mean, like, obviously there's people throughout the world and history that have done very malicious things. Like, how would you look at the Nazis? How would you look at the Soviets of the 20s and 30s that purged, a couple million, I think, what, like 10 to 15, 20 million people? Like, what would you say to those, like, very grand and malicious actions? Like, how does love, like, fall into that? Because I very much would not choose to love someone that would make choices like that.
So here's where so when I see someone today, I see their soul. I see their soul is equal to my soul. Their soul is unconditional love. Anything that they're doing that is reprehensible is merely the activity of the ego that is creating experiences for them to learn the lessons that they came here to learn. Now, if they are doing things which are harmful to other people, I'm not saying people should are allowed to run around and do that. We as a society have some, respect and love. So if you are in total attunement with where we come from, and everybody was like that, there would be no judgment. There would only be loving and caring concern to help people along the path to be in alignment with their source of being. And that would be unconditional love. That would be allowing their soul to express itself with its unique personality. But that unique personality, everything that expressed would be unconditional love. It would be supportive. It would be caring. It would be, there would be no vindictiveness. And there would always be teachings to help people move along this path of unconditional love. When people do, like the stuff going on in Ukraine right now, I feel really badly for all of the Ukrainians, of course, because, they didn't invite this in. At least they, don't believe they invited this in. And I feel badly for the Russian soldiers, because I think a lot of those Russian soldiers are there doing what they've been told to do and probably not even believing they should be them for themselves. But, they're kind of doing it. So all of this stuff that's going on right now, from a soul perspective, we're like a hologram. This is just a playground. This is a bunch of method actors that believe that the acting is their reality rather than the soul is their reality. If everybody came to the point of understanding that this is just a tool for us to learn lessons, and that really, if we let our souls express ourselves, all of us would be in the state of unconditional love. All of us would be caring and kind and considerate for everyone and everything around us. And we wouldn't have these acts of strife and violence and denigration and greed that run amok in our societies. And, the division in the future will not be between the wealthy and the poor. The division in the future is going to be in consciousness. And there's going to be people that understand this and live from a soul perspective. And there will be people that carry on and continue to believe that their 3D reality of this body is their reality. It is not their reality. And until you can actually come to that understanding, and you have to come to it yourself, life is an inward journey. And until you're willing to embark on this inward journey and actually get the experience of connecting back with source, so that source flows into you and fills you and helps you along this path and cleanses you, and helps you cleanse your consciousness of these egoic patterns of thinking and rebuild it, you will continue to live the life that you're living. You will continue to experience these things that you're experiencing, and you'll continue to have the feelings that you're feeling for others. It's not wrong. It is just the path that you're on to learn the lessons you need to learn.
I guess it feels to me in some regards very idealistic in, I mean, in the past, right? And even now, right? We see people that are very unwilling to follow that path of thinking and driving inwardly and following this path to unconditional love. And so this idea, though it sounds very good, right? It does sound very good for people to just express their souls and do this. It almost feels unrealistic. Um, and I don't know, like maybe, like I also feel like there might be a good argument to be made that maybe some people's souls are not what we think they are, right? And or should not be expressed without rules and confinements. I don't know, like that these are just questions that I'm curious about. Is I just don't know if that's a, a realistic direction, at least right now, because clearly all of, the violence, the greed, the hate, the mistrust, the, all of these things exist in society at the moment right now. And to live with this mindset could end very poorly, right? Like I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that, I mean, that seems like if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's a good way to die, right?
So, no, and I can understand exactly, like 5 years ago, I'd be right with you. And, so not everybody is going to be ready to take this path. Your death, are you afraid of death?
I've been to Afghanistan twice. It's never really,
Oh, okay.
never really scared me.
Okay, well, I mean, that's good. So there's going to be many people like, okay, so the stuff that you put in motion through your thinking and your feeling can take years to come into effect individually. Right. Collectively, the stuff that we put into motion through our collective thinking and feeling. So when we feed our minds, if you think your nutrition that you feed your body is important for your body, I can tell you that what you feed your mind is more important than what you feed your body. Absolutely. If you continue to feed your body all of the scary and negative things that are in the news, the violent movies that you watch, the the sexual movies, the emotive sexual movies that you watch, the denigrating, hateful, vindictive, revengeful movies and TV that you watch. These are the kinds of things that you wake up in the middle of the night concerned about. These are the kinds of things that you create scary pictures for yourself about. These are the things that you worry about that wake you up in the middle of the night. If you continue to collectively, we continue to feed our minds like that, we put into motion a collective consciousness pattern that must come into manifested form. It is the law of cause and effect. It cannot be avoided.
But these things exist, though. Like a majority of the people that I work with are people that have been through sexual trauma and childhood trauma of sorts. And so these aren't just things that have been manifested through movies and TV. These are things that really happen. And
absolutely,
the only reason I'm kind of pushing back against some of this is if you were to explain what you've explained to me to someone, to a rape victim, to a survivor of sexual assault, these things would not be understood, right? Because it's almost looking, it seems like, and this is my perception of what you're telling me. It feels like there's no choice in terms of like the ego takes over regardless of what the soul wants, right? In this, in like right now as a person, right? And so you look at these things like rape and sexual assault. So this man's ego takes over and he rapes a woman, and her ego takes over and she takes on the trauma. And then this guy gets away scot-free for the rest of his life, and then they both die, and then reincarnation, and then what happens? Like that, like there's no, to me, there's no justice there, right? There's no ability to move forward there. Like I don't really know exactly what I'm kind of getting to, but it just doesn't feel, it certainly doesn't feel comfortable from someone that goes through a situation like that, where there's very malicious intent. And certainly this malicious intent often comes from family members when we're talking about childhood sexual trauma. And so that's the only thing I'm really putting into question. And I know this is, I'm certainly not trying to insult or anything like that. I'm trying to understand, like these thoughts are, as I said before, they can be dangerous for people because there's not an explanation of the malicious. I don't know if that's enough for me.
So you haven't read my book, so
Certainly.
you don't,
Right.
you're not equipped yet with what I've explained in the book or what I've experienced as a child. So that's number one.
Fair enough.
Number two is that, of course, someone that is very traumatized by rape or other sexual assaults, I'm not suggesting that you could explain this to them and everything's going to be okay. That is not going to happen necessarily at all. And the third thing is that I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to share with you what I've learned and what's helped me, so that for people that want to read my book, they can understand what I've gone through. They can make their own decision.
Absolutely.
And if what I've explained today doesn't make sense to you, then that's not a problem. Don't pick up the book. Don't read it. But so you are, and this isn't wrong. It's because this is how we think. But you have to get your frame of reference to understand two things. One is that you have to get your frame of reference off one lifetime. And you have to understand that everything that's put into motion must come in a manifested form. So someone that maybe has done all kind of unspeakable things to people in a particular lifetime, that will come back to haunt them in future lifetimes. And it may be in one lifetime, it may be in 40 lifetimes that they have this repeated bad experiences. So, I'll just pick one out of the air, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong or even accurate, but I'll just give an example. So someone that maybe, participated in slave trading of African Americans out of Africa, they may be back right now and be a Black child in the poorest neighborhood and the biggest underdog in the US themselves. And that's a result of their slave trading that they initiated and they participated in lifetimes ago. So so someone that comes in, I'm not saying they've invited sexual assault. And again, you need to read my book, but I'm not saying they've invited it. But you have to understand, you don't know your own soul's journey, and you certainly don't know anybody else's own journey. But when you understand that things that you put into motion in one lifetime may come back or will come back, if it hasn't manifested in this lifetime to teach you the lesson, it will come in a future lifetime. And so the justice that you're talking about, you would like to see it happen to a person in this lifetime. From a soul perspective, you are infinite and you are eternal. And you will keep coming back and you will keep experiencing negative things in your life until you start to unravel that and make corrections and heal that and heal others that you have harmed. And so, if you continue to look at it from one lifetime, then yes, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. if you understand the bigger picture and can look at it from a larger lifetime and understand these mechanics of the universe and how we use them, you have the opportunity to view it differently. You have an opportunity to have a new perspective. You have an opportunity to change your life. And if you don't, that's not a problem. Just, like, please carry on carry on with your life, right?
Yeah.
And do the best you can. Absolutely. Because it's not up to me to push my way, my beliefs, or my understanding on other people. I am only sharing. And, if somebody doesn't want to listen, typically I won't even talk about it. If somebody's curious, I talk about it.
Well, I'm curious. Please understand that. It's not that I'm not listening. I am trying to understand. But I like to question everything,
And
even myself. Right. And so I've certainly,
you should question. You should really question. But again, you have to, this becomes an inward journey that you need to make decisions for yourself. It's got nothing to do with what anybody else says to you. And I'm saying, give yourself the opportunity to learn the knowledge and then make a decision for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't we close out today with the last question that I ask everyone? If there was one message you could leave the world, what would it be?
I think the message for the world today would be that no matter where you are in life, ill or healthy, happy, depressed, wealthy or poor, with the right knowledge and the right process, you have the ability to entirely transform your life to a state of inner peace, love, joy, and security and abundance. But that choice is yours. And if you choose not to learn it, then there's nothing wrong with that. That's entirely up to you. But if you want to do it, give yourself the opportunity.
Perfect. Well, from the wise words of Neil Elliott, thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you next time on the Dylan Experience.
Yeah, thanks. And again, congratulations with your little one.
Thank you.